American birth control league, which later became Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger was no doubt a controversial figure with disturbing views on eugenics, race, and population control. While some argue she even wanted to exterminate the black race, others are trying to erase that part of her past.
The Mike Wallace Interview. In the eyes of some, Margaret Sanger has been a heroine. In the eyes of others, she's been a destructive force.
In her own words, Sanger pushed for a society that limited births to those she deemed fit to have children.
I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born.
In 1916, Sanger opened the country's first birth control clinic. As a member of the American Eugenics Society, she advocated improving the genetic composition of humans through controlled reproduction of different races and classes. She often wrote about the issue in the journal she founded, called the Birth Control Review. In 1919, writing,
I personally believe in the sterilization of the feeble-minded, the insane, and the syphilitic. The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective.
Many point to a 1923 New York Times interview as proof of Sanger's racist motives, in which she referred to people as weeds, saying,
It means the release and cultivation of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extirpation of defective stocks, those human weeds which threaten the blooming of the finest flowers of American civilization.
Hayden Ludwig, an investigative researcher, has extensively studied Sanger's life and writings.
She talked about the need for race betterment through controlling these weeds, basically undesirable people.
In 1939, after opening another clinic in Harlem, the birth control activist launched the Negro Project, an initiative supported by black leaders, such as civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois. Critics claim the program.
So when I tell you our peoples are known to sell us out, even your boy W.E.B. Du Bois, y'all probably didn't know that, did y'all? So it's a pattern of blacks selling blacks, dated back to slavery, like I've been saying, and to this day. You got these so-called black leaders selling out the black community. Let's go.
Program used the pretense of better health and family planning for poor blacks in the South as an attempt to limit the black race. Ludwig says some on the left grapple with Sanger's past and how to interpret her legacy.
They know when she writes about human weeds, they know that it's repulsive. They know it's disgusting. The left will never abandon Margaret Sanger because if they do, she's the foundation of so many of their views.
Sanger once shared her vision for a preferred race at a women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan, writing in her autobiography,
Always, to me, any aroused group was a good group.
Despite those views, liberals praise Sanger's work while ignoring her history.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her.
Ryan Baumberger found...
Y'all heard that from Hillary Clinton, a person that said, exterminate blacks, human weeds. Your girl, Hillary Clinton, was live and direct. Y'all want to hear it again? Hold on.
Admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her.
Ryan Baumberger, founder of the Radiance Foundation, says abortion proponents are working to clean up Sanger's past and what she stood for.
They have to reinvent her every time they talk about her in order to justify their celebration of her.
Former Planned Parenthood Director Abby Johnson says those inside the abortion industry are trained to overlook Sanger's racist views.
They give you an answer like, well, I mean, yes, Margaret Sanger was a racist, but everybody was a racist back then. You accept it. because she is your hero. And she has to be your hero. You cannot question Planned Parenthood.
In 1997, Stephen Mosher of the Population Research Institute wrote about the push to repackage Margaret Sanger in the Wall Street Journal.
The reason I call it the repackaging of Margaret Sanger is because after the Nazi regime destroyed the legitimacy of eugenics forever, they then went back and said, oh, she was just an early feminist. She was just an early supporter of family planning. No, she wasn't. No, she was a supporter of giving IQ tests to people. She was in favor of using those IQ tests to determine who should be sterilized and who should have children.
In a response titled The Demonization of Margaret Sanger, Alexander Sanger, her grandson and president of Planned Parenthood at the time, called Mosher's editorial unfair. In the same piece, Esther Katz, director of NYU's Margaret Sanger Papers Project, claimed evidence revealing Sanger did not rationalize her support for birth control on racist grounds, that she never advocated genocidal policies aimed at racial, ethnic, or religious groups, and that she, in fact, believed access to birth control would benefit, not eliminate minority populations. Dr. Katz turned down our request for an interview, although in this article, the editor as public authority interpreting Margaret Sanger, she wrote, by our current highly sensitized standards, some of her attitudes and statements can be construed as racist, elitist, ethnocentric, and not politically correct. In 1942, Margaret Sanger's American Birth Control League became Planned Parenthood, which has moved to fulfill its founders' goals, helped greatly by the Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade.
Under the veil of secrecy and deception, 60+ million babies have not been born because they were aborted legally since '73. 1/3 of that population belong to the African American community.
A frightening and telling number, given blacks make up only 13% of the U.S. population. Dan Gaynor of the Media Research Center says that Sanger's true mission remains alive and well throughout today's abortion industry.
Look at the maps. See where the abortion facilities are. They are near places where people are marginalized, people are poor, people are minority, and that's their target market.
Generation after generation, we have built a better world for our daughters.
Because of allies in the media and academia, Gaynor also points out how speech from conservatives and others about Sanger's past, Planned Parenthood practices, and abortion is often classified as hate speech.
There is nothing as close to a sacrament in the media as abortion. It is a holy writ that abortion is protected. And anybody who comes out against it, any organization, any business, anybody, the media swarm.
So does social media.
Facebook's new oversight board, and this is really concerning, has 4 co-chairs. And they're going to be the appeals board for content. Well, one of the 4 oversight board is on the board of an pro-abortion group. There's no pro-lifers. They're not there.
The problem also exists on many college campuses.
I remember at Harvard, they laughed when I was talking about the history of eugenics. And they said, that doesn't matter. Planned Parenthood is not like it was during Margaret Sanger's days.
Those who oppose her views say not true and are committed to exposing her past for future generations. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
To understand this, you have to go back to what young brother here referred to as the house Negro and the field Negro. Back during slavery, there was 2 kinds of slaves. There was the house Negro and the field Negro. The house Negro, they lived in the house. To understand this, you have to go back to what young brother here referred to as the house Negro and the field Negro. Back during slavery, there was 2 kinds of slaves. There was the house Negro and the field Negro. The house Negro, they lived in the house with master. They dressed pretty good. They ate good because they ate his food, what he left. They lived in the attic or the basement, but still they lived near their master. and they loved their master more than the master loved himself. They would give their life to save their master's house quicker than the master would. The house Negro, if the master said, we got a good house here, the house Negro said, yeah, we got a good house here. Whenever the master said we, he said we. That's how you can tell a house Negro. If the master's house caught on fire, the house Negro would fight harder to put the blaze out than the master would. If the master got sick, the house Negro would say, what's the matter, boss? We sick. We sick. He identified himself with his master more than his master identified with himself. And if you came to the house Negro and said, let's run away, let's escape, let's separate, that house Negro would look at you and say, man, you crazy. What you mean separate? Where is there a better house than this? Where can I wear better clothes than this? Where can I eat better food than this? That was that house Negro. In those days, he was called a house nigger. And that's what we call him today, because we still got some house niggers running around here.
Hey. Good morning. Hi.
What I remember from the campaign trail is even with a supportive family, it can still be grueling. You got any tricks of the trade?
I work out every morning, regardless of how much sleep I've had. It's just the best way to start the day. For months, I couldn't find weights to order weights. They were sold out, so I had these liter water bottles that I filled, of course, with water and used them as hand weights.
That's resourceful. There were times where I was like in a little Iowa town, and the only treadmill was in the back of a beauty salon, and I'd be walking by, and women be looking, why is this guy there? Do you have like a playlist that you're working
I've got my playlist. You know, I love some Mary J. Blige. And also, you know what I really also, as a break in the day, I love is to FaceTime with the kids in my life and get a sense of the world through their eyes, you know, and talk to them. How are you feeling about things? What is your day like?
The other thing that I think is, for me was always great was those moments, and you never knew when they'd come, when you just have a conversation with, maybe it's a security guard in a building, or maybe it's some young kid who runs up and said they ran for, student council, and
that's right.
Do you have any advice? Right, just those small interactions, right. Somebody one-on-one, right?
And I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing.
Look, everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America? Then, no, do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision. So that's where the federal
government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
To understand this, you have to go back to what young brother here referred to as the house Negro and the field Negro. Back during slavery, there was two kinds of slaves. There was the house Negro and the field Negro. The house Negro, they lived in the house with master. They dressed pretty good. They ate good because they ate his food, what he left. They lived in the attic or the basement, but still they lived near their master. And they loved their master more than the master loved himself. They would give their life to save their master's house quicker than the master would. The house Negro, if the master said, we got a good house here, the house Negro said, yeah, we got a good house here. Whenever the master said we, he said we. That's how you can tell a house Negro. If the master's house caught on fire, the house Negro would fight harder to put the blaze out than the master would. If the master got sick, the house Negro would say, what's the matter, boss? We sick. We sick. He identified himself with his master more than his master identified with himself. And if you came to the house Negro and said, let's run away, let's escape, let's separate, that house Negro would look at you and say, man, you crazy. What you mean separate? Where is there a better house than this? Where can I wear better clothes than this? Where can I eat better food than this? That was that house Negro. In those days, he was called a house nigger. And that's what we call him today, because we still got some house niggers running around here.
So tell me about Joe and your relationship with Joe, and what do I need to know? Like, what's the thing about the ice cream? He loves ice cream. Tell me about that.
Well, listen, ice cream is big. Pasta with red sauce, he can go deep on that. He really does like those aviator glasses. He knows he looks good in them. But look, the main thing to know about Joe is that Joe has never lost his sense of why we do this. And we do it because of, for him, memories of his family back in Scranton, and then the people at Delaware that he represented, the folks on the Amtrak train he met each and every day. He's constantly aware that that is why we do this, and that everything that comes up, his focus is going to be how's that going to help those people who sent him there. Now, what that means is that if you have a joint event, he may be taking a little longer than what appears on the schedule.
Oh, I say it again. You've been had. You've been took. You've been